This episode is powered by denmeditation.com. Though meditation is the primary focus, the bigger goal is for people to understand and love themselves, thus creating more harmony in the community at large. To find out more about Den Meditation's teacher training programs, retreats, and all things Den Meditation, go to denmeditation.com. Welcome to Den Talks Podcast. This is Tal, your host, the founder of Den Meditation, and I love today's episode. We have Murray Hidary here today, and he does these amazing immersive concerts. He's an incredible musician. He connected to music at age 5, and he's been playing and producing and creating ever since. He has a beautiful story. We get into so much about the fabric of music, what it means. I am telling you guys, I say this a few times in the episode because I was so shocked by it. He would just tell stories, and I could literally feel the vibration of music in the universe going through me. We get into these incredible adventures he had that kind of awoke in the spirit in him, which he is now helping us remind ourselves that we too can always live in this space of musicality and the highs and the lows and the beauty of what it reminds us that we come from music, we are music, and it's all around us. So enjoy this episode. It really is special. Stay till the end because he tells an unbelievably personal story that has an ending that just had me in tears. I'm really grateful for his presence, and I'm really grateful for this episode. I hope you enjoy. I'm so excited to talk to you because what an incredible life you've had and journey. And on paper, things feel so disparate sometimes a little bit, but I know they're not, obviously, because of, who you are. So I would love to talk a little bit about the journey because I feel like, pun intended, there is a current, of music that strings it all together. So I would love to chat about it because I think it's really incredible. And I think it should remind people kind of when you're in touch with yourself and open and following what comes your way, you're always kind of on the right path. And it might make it look like you live 5 different lives in one lifetime.
Totally. And communicating that in the past has been somewhat challenging when I was making those transitions, but it's landed in a very integrated place for me, certainly.
Well, talk a little bit about, first of all, talk about how your passion for music began.
Music, found me, or I found music, when I was very young. I was 5 years old.
Wow.
And, my mom dragged my brother and I to music lessons. So, it wasn't so much a voluntary thing. It was like, okay, this is what we're doing. And I played the cello first. That was my first instrument.
And, wow. 5?
And at 5, of course, the cello is, at that point, really kind of much bigger than I was. So what they do is they give you a viola, which is smaller, but usually played on the shoulder and the chin. But you hold it vertically like a cello, between your legs. And it's actually the same strings, just an octave higher. So you have the same fingering, and you can manage that size. So when you're 5, 6 years old, that's what you play. It's basically like a mini.
Like your voice tenor. It's like, and as your voice goes lower, you finally get the bigger.
Right. Yeah, it's a mini cello, and then then as you grow, they give you a half size and a 3/4 size until finally you get a full size. But so cello was my first instrument, but then at 6 years old, I started the piano as well, and very quickly music became a language for me that was really important. It became a way for me to kind of lose myself in that, dream world. And I was a pretty shy kid. So it just was a realm that I could be without, any worry, it just was a very safe world for me.
Did you choose the cello, or was that your mom's choice?
Yeah, it just kind of happened. My brother got the violin, I got the cello, so we'd have different instruments. That's just how it was. And we all played instruments, and and of all of us, I took it to a professional level, studied in university, and my major was music, and I felt like I had my own thing to say with music. So becoming a composer became apparent to me probably in high school. I was like, that's what I want to do.
Now, as a kid, like you're talking about, you were shy, and so this was like a dream world, the kind of an escape for you that was very safe. Did you, was it, talk to me a little bit more about what that was like for you. Was it just sitting either at the keyboard or holding the instrument and right away there was a calmness, or was it something as the vibrations of the music started? Um, was it in practicing and repetition? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I hated practicing like, standard pieces. I just didn't enjoy it at all. I'm not sure many kids do. But no, for me, the magic was, sitting in that room. The piano was in this, separate room in the house. So it was generally quiet, much quieter than the rest of the house, which was usually kind of semi-chaotic with so many, kids running
Kids.
around and all of us. So it was generally a quieter space, and I could kind of noodle around with different melodic ideas and harmonic ideas, and that's what I love doing. Just kind of creating um, my own little songs, my own melodies, and experimenting with that. So that really became this world of exploration, and very quickly I think I got how it felt, inside when I started to, play with these sounds.
Do you think it helped you like get through, like if you were that shy, and I'm assuming you're a little more introverted then too, because it sounds like you wanted to like get out of the chaos of like the house. Um, did it feel like, did it almost kind of refuel you? Like if you were depleted, was it a place you could go to just kind of reset?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a place that I just found a real calm. I found a real peace. It was fun. It was all of these things in one place, and it just was, where I went over and over again. I think that, I also had this side which does love to engage the outside world. So, in the spectrum of introvert extrovert, some of us have a more dominant, so I kind of view myself as a um, extroverted introvert in that way, right? And
Ambivert?
yeah, and kind of have this, or an ambivert in some ways. Over time, it's developed because now, the places I find myself in are generally places I love being. So, it, you know, I think as we gain more agency in our lives with different choices, right? It's, we include ourselves in places and circles that are more authentic to us and more comfortable. And
And as a performer, I mean, that's so interesting because you can be amongst huge crowds, which is what you do. You bring people together, and but yet it's in like the agency of which you have a mastery of.
yeah, it's a funny dynamic when you kind of go out on stage, so to speak, and you can be in front of 1,000 people, and yet there's this um, almost more acute intimacy
Mhm.
that actually shifts. Once you just let all of the energy settle, because the I think the magic of live performance is in playing for just one person, um, times 1,000, but you're playing for one person. So that's how I think about it when I go out there. And I always, I not just scan the audience before a concert, but I'll actually walk through the audience, certainly in the front area, and I'll meet, quite a number of people who are attending, just to kind of feel who's there, just kind of, just get a sense of the energy of who's in the room. And I'll meet quite a number of people, maybe on their way in, or right before the concert. I'll, say hi to folks, and then when I begin, I really kind of visualize that, and as if I'm playing for just that one person. And I visualize that with each person.
That's so interesting. And does the energy of what you got from that person, because everyone gives off a different energy, then kind of affect how you execute?
I think there's no way for it not to.
Right.
But question is whether it's conscious or subconscious, right? And outdoor concerts are different vibe than indoor theaters, and it works both ways, right? But either way, it's input, it's data, and so I'll give you kind of two opposite examples. One was last week we had a beach concert, and before the concert, this young man came up to me and he said that he wanted to propose to his girlfriend at the end of the concert and wanted to see if that was okay with me, right? So we had a little conversation about how to do it and when to do it, and it was going to be a real surprise and all that. So now I'm going into that, and that was minutes before I started playing. So now I'm going into my performance, and keep in mind that every performance is improvised. I don't play like
Right.
a pre-memorized anything. So each mind travel is a different journey. So I go into it with that, top of mind. So of course, that's going to influence
A
it
lot
in
of
some.
interludes of dun, 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 dun,
Yeah,
dun,
right.
dun, dun.
Definitely not.
I'm kidding. That would be
So,
awful.
that's right. Actually, I've had a member of the community get married and ask me to actually play. This is a different person years ago, and I was like, I don't really do the wedding thing. I'm not. That's not me. I'm not the. And she goes, no, you don't understand. I want you to play like your music, like improvise a mind travel as I'm walking down the aisle. That's what she said, and I'm
Did you
like,
do it?
I was like, that I can do. So I and she marched down to an
I
improvised
love that.
piano. It was just a stunning moment and very different than the standard fare. But anyway, so this young man, he actually did get up at the microphone during the QA sharing part at the end, and he popped the question. He invited his girlfriend up to the mic, and she kind of timidly came up, like, what's going on? And he started to profess his love for her and their shared dreams and building a life together. He reaches into his back pocket, pulls out a ring, gets down on one knee, and he pops the question. She bursts out into tears. They embrace. She says yes, of course, and it was an incredible moment. With I think at that beach concert there were about 400 people screaming and clapping and in full support. So that's what live energy, right, is all about. Now, on the opposite extreme, I was performing at the planetarium. I do this visual, beautiful planetarium show as well, and it's pin drop silent in this theater, right? And there was someone in the third-ish row, second row. I couldn't tell; it was like off to the side. I couldn't really see, but they had some kind of persistent cough that was like, okay, if it happens once, whatever. And it just didn't stop. It just didn't stop. And they, for some reason, it did not occur to them to excuse
Yeah.
themselves from the theater. And so there was just this every now and then this cough that would come, and so as a performer, right? Of course, it's you have to work with it. You can't say anything, you can't stop, you can't give them a look, you can't do anything, and so then it's about like the acceptance of it, and so it becomes this actually very beautiful practice of like, how do you work with this energy, right? And so then I kind of incorporate it in, and I actually use it as a way to inspire the improvisation in its own way, and that's what it becomes.
I mean, and that's such a meditation in and of itself. When I
That's right.
first opened up the studios in LA, which we've since had to close after COVID, but it was in LA in a major street. And sometimes it's loud. Sometimes the ambulances
Right.
are going by, or at the very least, someone's cracking their knuckles or shifting a lot
Right.
in the room. And we used to always have to teach that, like, part of it is just allowing it to be. And how
Yeah.
do you? So that's funny to think about it in that context too.
And you also don't know what's happening for the audience member, right? So there was another planetarium show where, as I'm playing, there's gorgeous imagery of like planets going by, like, there'll be like Jupiter and Saturn, and just gorgeous, gorgeous imagery, like we're like mind traveling through the cosmos, right? And then every now and then, when a planet would appear on the screen, I'd hear a kid scream out the name of the planet,
Oh, I'm so
right?
excited.
He's so excited. He's like, Jupiter. He's like, Neptune. I'm like, okay. I'm like, charming, but a little distracting, right? And I'm like, okay, all right. Once, twice. It was like 6 times the kid exclamated out. And he's like, the sun. Each one was more exuberant than the one before. And I was like, okay, really excited. That's great. After the show, this family came up to me to say hello, and I could immediately tell that it was that kid. And the first thing the kid does is just run over, and he's probably up to my waist. He just comes over and gives me a hug, like just embraces me. And I was like, and the parents, are like, he really loved it. And it turned out that this young child is on the spectrum, and he's got autism, and he just says what he's experiencing. And I was like, yeah, perfect, absolutely perfect. And what an experience, right? He must have had, and his family, right? And in the allowing that his family had of knowing that that probably is going to happen, but and everyone benefited from that, right? So it's all perspective, how we see it. Oh, is it a distraction, or is it an opportunity for more connection and love? Is what it ended up being. So it's all what we do with it.
But it's so interesting because, especially because you improvise, I don't think maybe people realize, but the amount of space you have to hold is huge. I mean, not only is there so much energy, like you said, if you have 400 people out there, that's a lot of space, but also you're improvising, you're getting into your own subconscious realm. I'm sure you're connecting to your higher self, things are channeling, you're aware of what's going on because and then you're hearing anything that could be quote unquote a distraction. I mean, that's a lot of space to hold.
It is, and I think it became a muscle. It is a muscle that I've really trained over time, and I've been doing this a long, long time, and even before I started doing it publicly, this was my personal practice since I was in high school, since I was in college. College more formally, because I studied music, composition, and piano. But in my own home, this was my practice. What I do on stage now is what I've done, countless times. And
Hmm.
so it's a muscle that I developed of less a muscle of playing. And of course, there is so much training and just the technique and being able to do the things you need to do on any instrument, especially the piano. But it's more a muscle of listening, is what it is. And so it's it's a practice of how to just get out of your own way the moment you sit down with the instrument. And it is with the instrument. It is a partnership with the instrument.
I was going to say, we'll talk about it because this is where I think, and then we'll get back to your journey, but we're in some other good territory, which I love. So, talk about the idea of just, I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, and it's what you do. So, it's how spirituality and music are literally one and the same. And I think what you do such a beautiful job of too is really integrating. I think you probably always lived it, but you have now an ability, I think, to even vocalize it, just
Mm-hmm.
what are bigger spiritual teachings through kind of just the idea of music as well. And I think anyone can acknowledge that. It's like you go into a big stadium, if everyone's singing a song at the same time, it just does something to your core, all the way down to what you do in sound baths. I mean, my whole family laughs because I can't watch American Idol, The Voice, or AGT without crying the minute I can tell someone's connecting into their true self and actually performing. And then I'm in tears because it just gets me to my soul. So there's obviously
Cool.
something in those vibrations. So when you're saying getting out of your own way and how that's a relationship with the instrument, open that up a little bit of how there is that beauty of just kind of space of allowing. And I think someone like you who's such a beautiful musician and really train how to learn that through music, but how that also you can widen that to those of us who are just walking without any, musicianship every day, can use those same techniques in our regular life.
Music, first and foremost, for all of us, right? Whether you play music or just listen to music, it's the language of emotion, right?
Yes.
We always say, when I don't have the words for something, we turn to music, and so that's an important part of the human experience. And human beings have been using music, right, since the beginning of time, starting with rhythmic instruments, percussive instruments, drums of different sorts to flutes, and then eventually they became more sophisticated. But music has always been an integral part of it. If you actually look at the kind of the neurophysiology that music is involved with, we actually developed two different auditory pathways. One is much more primitive, and one is much more evolved and developed. But there are actually two auditory pathways in the brain, so it's quite complex and quite sophisticated. The primal one is actually tied to our movement center, the hippocampus in the brain. So this is part of our original, early brain, and part of why I think music has such an emotional impact is because the original wiring of sound, which music, of course, is a part of, is that when you hear something, it has to trigger either a fight or flight mechanism. Because if you think about our early ancestors roaming the savannah, if they hear a sound, they have to decide whether it's friend or foe.
Right.
Right. So they hear a sound in the bush. Is it something they're going to hunt, or is it something that's hunting them? And so it's the sound is immediately triggered to our legs, like movement, which is why when you hear beat, you start to move, you start to dance.
Even
right?
just talking
It's
about it.
all the same wiring that's taking place. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when we think about the impact of music, because that's our natural wiring. Now, of course, it's gotten much more sophisticated. We can express very, subtle and beautiful emotions through music. But that's the origin, of it. Now, when we take it now to a much grander scale, for me, like, I always wanted to be an astronaut when I was a kid, right? I mean, I love music and I wanted to be a musician, but like many kids, I just was fascinated with
Jupiter, Mars.
exactly with the cosmos. And so I very early used music as a means to understand the universe more broadly. And so a question I would constantly ask myself was, if the energy of the universe had a sound, what would it be? Now,
how old were you when you started asking yourself that question?
I would say high school, kind of late high school. I was asking that question. It was also the time around 16 when I found Eastern philosophy and meditation. So, I grew up Orthodox Jewish, went to a yeshiva, a very, very religious school, grew up in a very rigid structure, religious structure. And I had a beautiful childhood, I have an amazing family, amazing community I grew up in. But there was something missing for me in terms of my place in the universe, the question that most people at some point ask themselves. And I started asking that at around 15, 16 years old. And then I found the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Yep.
I found many other books around that time. And, this was a time that meditation, certainly mindfulness, any of that was not,
No.
it was not on every corner like it is now.
How did your family react when were you open about bringing those books home?
Yeah, I mean, my family, I didn't really tell them anything about it until I turned 18. So I used to go sneak off from Brooklyn, where I grew up, and I used to take the subway, and I used to go to Manhattan and find lectures, find classes. I just would find all these little pockets, these little groups, and I would go to these events myself. I had no friend to go with. I had no family to go with to these things, and I just snuck off and went to these events and met some incredible people. Did seminars, did courses, did all these lectures, and tons of reading, tons of reading. And finally, at 18, I kind of quote came out, I guess, religiously, but I told my family that I was pursuing a different path. And then I left Brooklyn, and I traveled for a year around the world in a kind of spiritual awakening, in this beautiful year of exploration, both externally, but ultimately it ended up being a deep inner exploration during that year of traveling alone throughout the world.
And they were totally supportive.
They were not totally
They
supportive,
were not.
but ultimately they were supportive. And I had a beautiful conversation with my dad, where I explained the journey I was on, and he said something profound and stunningly supportive, right? Which
Mhm.
was, the most important thing is to be a good person. You are a good person, and that's what matters most. And he set me off on my journey. It very much was, the in many ways the beginning of the book Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Yeah.
When his father doesn't want him to go, and wants him to continue in the tradition, and there's such a pathway there, and a beautiful life available to him. But Siddhartha persists and says, no, I want to have a transparent relationship, with you, with his dad, right? And that's what I wanted. I wanted to have an open, expressed, authentic relationship with my parents, and not kind of be in the shadows with it.
So you went off for, it was like a year, you said, just traveling the world. Where did you go? And was there a soundtrack to that year?
um, I was figuring out where to go. I knew I just wanted to get out and see the world. Having grown up in such a parochial, such an enclosed, insular community, and so I, I had this globe on my desk as a kid, right?
Me
Probably got
too.
it at my bar mitzvah,
Me too.
and right, and so I kind of looked at this physical globe, right? And like, it's hard to imagine we even had these things, but
Love a
I
globe.
kind of I looked at the furthest spot from Brooklyn, from New York, and it was the Australia, New Zealand, the South Pacific. It was the opposite side of the world. I was like, that's where I'm going, and I ended up buying a one-way ticket with all these different stops on Qantas Airlines. There was, of course, no internet then, so I literally went to their office in New York and like physically bought the ticket.
I remember doing that. And if you had to make a change, you'd go back to the office and like stand
Crazy
online.
paper ticket, like okay, and and then I just took off. I took off, and nobody knew I was leaving, and I just set about on this journey. It was the most exciting moment for me. I mean, I remember being on that flight that lasted forever to get there, and it was the most emotional. I mean, I was just so emotional. I was like journaling, and just such a beautiful moment of freedom that I felt for the first time. And I ended up stopping in Fiji because it was one of the stops I was allowed to, add to my flight. It was like a multi-stop flight. And I ended up spending 4 months in the Fiji Islands. Um, and, not sitting on some, beach somewhere having a good time. This was, I somehow, through serendipity, um, like met someone at the airport on the bus, who then said, he was sitting behind me on the bus going to the town, and he said, you should go visit the village I grew up in. I was like, okay. I mean, I was 18. I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go. He he took me to the fishing port in the main town. He puts me on this little fishing boat. I think I gave, the father and two sons that had this little fishing boat a few dollars, and they were going to take me to this village. I ended up being on this little boat for a day and a half. Okay. That's how long it took to get to this remote island in the archipelago of Fiji. And I just didn't know where we were going. And he drops me off on this seemingly deserted beach, and he drives away. And I walk up with my backpack, in the water. I'm like holding the backpack up, and I walk up onto the beach, onto the sand, looking around. I don't see any sign of civilization anywhere. And out of the trees, these three men come walking. It's like a mirage. And one of them says, who are you? What are you doing here? And I had a little note from the guy on the bus who told me to go check this out. And so I handed the note, which was all written in Fijian, and they welcomed me. They welcomed me in, and I ended up living their life. And I was there for 4 months,
Wow.
just farming and fishing and just living their life. And it was really the most beautiful experience I had ever had up until that point, for sure.
How did you know when to leave?
It was literally this one morning. I woke up and I was like, I have to call my parents. And of course, there was no way to do that on this island. And I had not spoken to them for months at that point. And so when the next little supply boat, was going, I got on it, said goodbye to them, went to the main island, called them collect, and we had this very emotional conversation. And then I said, okay, now it's time to continue moving on.
Wow. So then where'd you hit next?
Then I went to New Zealand, which was just next door. And at that point, I realized that the best way to really see a place, to really intimately see a place, is actually on a bicycle. So, a car just goes really fast. A train goes really fast, and you can't really stop if you want to see something that's of interest. And there's too much momentum. You just wouldn't stop. Even in a car, it's very rare that you just kind of pull over if you see something that catches your eye. Walking is possible, but that would just take really long time. So a bicycle, I felt, was the right speed, where you can actually make some progress, and you can just be very intimate. There's no barrier between you and the environment you're moving through. So that's what I did. I got a bicycle, and I traveled thousands and thousands of miles on this little bicycle, with a sleeping bag, a tent, and my camera, and that was pretty much it. That I had for months and months and months and months, just going through New Zealand, through all kinds of climates, and then Australia, Southeast Asia, so many different places and countries, and the adventures were numerous.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about music during this time for you.
The whole experience to me was, it was just like experiencing it all. And so I think it just all became this material that I was absorbing that would one day become, become the music. And so I remember being up in Thailand, Northeast Thailand. And back then we used to use these Lonely Planet guides.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. So I had this Lonely Planet Thailand, and in it there was some photographs, but just a few. Like there was like a few photograph pages every now and then. And there was one photograph of this older Thai man playing a flute, a bamboo flute from Thailand. And I was like, that looks beautiful. I want to not just find that flute, I want to find that guy. I was like, I want to find that guy. And it didn't list who he was. It just said flute musician in Roya, in this little town in northeast Thailand. So I was like, okay, I'm going to find this guy. And I go to this town and I have his picture. And I was like, someone's going to know him. So I start walking around and I'm showing the picture to people. And within one day, on this little alley, kind of in the middle of nowhere, I find this musician. And he makes these flutes. And he lives in this, very humble little, home. And I spent 2 days with him, bought a flute from him. He taught me how to play it, the basics. We communicated in the most, awkward way because he didn't speak any English and my Thai was limited to the little hand dictionary that I could flip through to say words. And so, but we spoke through music. And I then had like a sleeve for it made, like a carrier, like a case with a shoulder strap. And I had someone hand sew that in the town with some material, some textiles I bought from another shop. And I slung it over my shoulder and I rode my bike, back. And so, that's the relationship I had with music as a way to engage people who live there.
Do you still have that flute?
I still have it. It's in the closet downstairs. Yes.
I love that. Oh, I love that. So now I'm thinking about the question you started asking yourself 16 to 18 of what's the, sound the universe would make. When you're on
Yeah.
this trip, are you re-asking yourself that question again? Like, do you find different answers or are you getting deeper into it?
Nature became a real important part of this whole journey. So I think if there's any religion that I subscribe to, it was just a kind of a very deep pantheism, a very deep like nature has all the answers and wanting to connect more deeply with nature. And so that's really the pathway that I took. And so I got very into different kinds of like sports and activities that brought me closer to nature. One was scuba diving. I learned how to scuba dive on that trip, and that's an incredible story in and of itself. How I learned. So I wanted to create a deep intimacy with nature. So it was like, what activities, right, would allow me to do that, right? It wasn't like, oh, it sounds fun and it looks like it would be cool. No, it was like the goal was a connection and intimacy with nature. So what do I have to do, right, to get that? So scuba diving was one of them. I got really into rock climbing and mountain climbing to create an intimacy with the earth, right? When you're rock climbing, right, you're 1 inch from the face of the mountain, and suddenly you can see every groove and crack and detail, right, that you can't see from further back. So it's like being in a intimate relationship, right? You get to see all of the idiosyncrasies of a person. Well, the same thing with a mountain, right? You get to um, know the mountain in a very different way
Yeah.
when you're climbing with the mountain, right? It's not about conquering in any way. It's about having that intimacy. And all the elements, that I carried that through. Eventually became a paragliding pilot because I wanted to feel the wind. I wanted to understand the wind. So I got my license and became a pilot. I would run off mountains and just use the air, the thermals, right, the hot air to circle up and truly fly like a bird. And now you understand the winds, the invisible energy. You can't see these thermals, you can't see it, but all of us have seen birds that take those currents, right, of the sky upwards and effortlessly just float, right, in the atmosphere. That's what you can do with a paraglide. So that was like truly miraculous, and to just feel nature in that way and to be in that conversation with nature. So these were all really conversations with nature that I would have. right? Whether it's deep under the water, whether it's with the mountain, whether it's with the sky, and then so many magical moments happen. Probably my first and deepest spiritual awakening happened scuba diving when I had an encounter with a whale.
Oh, tell me
And
about it.
again, I was 18, and I came up to the surface. My tank was empty. I put the tank on the deck, and the captain said, Murray, there's a whale port side, you know. So I put my tank down and I swam over, and there was, I mean, this whale had to be at least, I don't know, 40 feet, just bigger than I could ever imagine. And it was just floating there on the surface, curious. And I just gently swam over and had my snorkel on and just swam over. And I just stopped probably around 10 feet from it. And we just locked eyes. Remember, its eye is
Mm.
like this
Oh,
big,
huge. Right.
and and instantly just got lost in it. And it started to, just kind of gently float. And I got a little closer, it would float away. And I was probably about 10 feet from it. It felt like an eternity. It was probably no more than 4 minutes or 5 minutes, but that was such an expansion within me. And then it floated off into the blue horizon under the water and disappeared. And it was just me there because I was a novice scuba diver. So I always ran out of air in my tank first.
You're up. So you're up.
So I had to go up first because I was so new and I breathed too much and I wasted my air. So, but that served me that day because I was the
Yeah.
first to come up and I had the whale to myself and had that moment. And then everyone else, came up after the other divers and they were like, oh my God. So it was a powerful expansion for sure.
Every time you've been talking about any of these experiences, the ocean, the wind, it's like I keep getting chills. And it's like I just keep picturing that in all those moments, you were just getting like these heavy downloads. Like you said, it was these magical conversations. It just feels like you were, I mean, right? Music is energy, it's all energy. And it just feels like you were just getting these crazy energetic downloads for you to translate. Like you said, it was the music being given to you then, and that you were going to put it out later. It's really amazing because I can feel it as you talk about it.
Yeah.
It's like really strong. Like
I think that,
my whole body's like,
you just, as we're talking about it now, some thoughts are occurring to me, which is there is this through line of like surrendering that somehow I was present to as a very young person. And meaning, and what I mean by that is like just allowing something to unfold, and just creating space for something and not having to force anything.
right.
And I think part of that really came from, my childhood dynamic, which, my mom was super strong. I had a very strong presence in my mother. And, uh, and my relationship with her was, she really was, I mean, such a godlike figure for me and such a powerful figure. And there was always this, and she also was a bit mercurial, in her moods and her emotions. So there was always this stance, this attitude that I would take, which was you really had to listen for the mood, for the moment, for what's happening, right? To know how to be. And so from a very young age, I think I developed a very hyper sensitive antenna
Hmm.
for the room, for the energy of the room in that way. And I say that metaphorically, right? So it becomes like anywhere I am, it's like, what am I listening for? Right. So that I think I developed that at a very young age, right? Because of that dynamic, so I could be, in the middle of nowhere and it's like, okay, what's available here versus what do I want to, dominate it with? It's never about that.
It also seems to me when you're talking about allowing that because if to go to your whole through story, I feel like what you did do really well is allow, like you said, you didn't just follow in the footsteps of the religion you were given, even through music. And then, like, and we haven't talked about it, it's okay because I love what we're talking about, but then moving into the tech space and allowing that, you've been successful in every area that you've chosen to focus in. And I find it like when you're talking about these stories of travel, of course you do what you do now. It makes so much sense. Like it seems like you were getting the downloads of what you're going to, of course you do these amazing underwater concerts because, and I'd love to know if the idea ever hit you while you were actually scuba diving or if it was later, how to recreate it. I'd be curious to know because once you said that, I'm like, oh, it makes sense that you understand what sound underwater, because there is a whole sound thing that happens under there,
Yeah.
whether it comes from you or you're just listening or you kind of can hear the animals and you can almost hear their tails, swish the water. Like it's amazing. And you can hear there's a whole different thing happening under there. It makes total sense what you do now in these immersions that are so beautiful. So I asked like three questions in there, but let's stick kind of to where we are now. Talk a little bit about how these ideas of, let's say, the underwater concerts that you do, when did that idea hit you? Is that an early idea from scuba diving that you tucked away and put away and then all of a sudden made sense later? Or did you go back because of your experience? I'm so curious now.
Back to that question of what does the universe sound like? It's on every scale. So when I can remember times hiking throughout the years, and sometimes I would just stop on the trail and I would put my ear to a creek, because of the way, not just the creek, but the way the sound was bouncing off the rocks right near it, or the leaves rustling in the wind, to stop so I wouldn't hear my footsteps and just listen to that. So sounds, um, it's the universe, right? Singing. I mean, all of it. So we're in a vibrational universe. It's an infinite vibrational spectrum. We can experience a very small sliver of it with our senses, uh, but even that sliver is magical, right? And it's not just the sounds, but light is also music, right? It's just a different frequency of vibration. So we have to look at really the full panoply of vibration as the music of the universe. And again, a small part of it we can experience directly. But the knowing that it's all out there, from the smallest vibrations of subatomic particles, right? I mean, that is music, right? The actual particle movement, at the smallest level in every atom, in every subatomic particle, is musical, all the way to gravitational waves, right? The largest undulating vibration that we know of in the universe, right? This is when like two neutron stars collide, when two black holes collide, they ripple out this vibration through billions of light years of space and time. And it's like when we take the tablecloth at the end of a meal and shake it off, right? From all the crumbs, in the backyard. That's what two black holes colliding does to the fabric of space herself, right? And so that's music. The first one we detected with the LIGO instrumentation that they developed, which is incredible, is in the key of C. The vibration uh, of that wave is in the key of C, frequency wise. Now we can't hear it, but we can measure it with these tools. So everything is vibrational. Everything, is music. And so then it's a question of, okay, how do we access that in more and more powerful ways, and not just intellectually, but viscerally, in an embodied way. So the idea for the underwater concert was, how do I get people more connected to the water that they are, right? Not that, oh, sound sounds cool in music. Sound sounds great in water, but that we are actually water,
Right.
right? And how do we actually reconnect to that source? It's we easily forget, like, we're mostly made up of water, every cell of our body, um, and so how do we tap back into that? So the placing the audience in the water, and then having the sound and vibration there. And then I heat the water up. And this is the critical part of it. Our body temperature, right, inside is 98.6. The surface of our skin is generally around 93, 94, 95. But then the air around us, of course, is much lower. You're talking about probably, generally 70 degrees, depending where you are. And that's how we know we have a body, right? It's a crazy question, but if I asked you, how do you know that you have a body?
It's so true. No, you're right.
Like, how do you know that? Prove to me you have a body. Oh, well, I can look at my body. Okay, fine, that's fair. All right, you can see it. Got it. Okay, what if you close your eyes? Then how would you know? Well, I could lick it. I could lick my body. Okay, then take that away. Let's take taste away and let's take touch away. So you can't feel your body. You can't touch it in any way, right? Then how would you know you had the body? Well, I could sense the temperature differential around my skin. So even though I don't physically touch my skin, the neuron the nerve endings on my skin can sense the temperature differential of the molecules that are colder, meaning they're moving slower. So they're hitting my skin, and there's a temperature differential, and that's what I can sense. So when I move my arm like through the air, like I can feel that temperature differential. But what if there was no temperature differential, right? Like, why is a balmy, tropical day so relaxing, right? It's almost like the molecules on your skin can just bleed into the atmosphere, right? It feels that way, actually.
I just love that you're
Now,
saying this because I used to say this all the time when people were like, do you like it hot or cold? I'm like, I like it that temperature when you don't even feel anything. I literally would say that.
exactly,
I'm like, so you almost disappear.
exact. So bingo. So you just said the magic word, right? So now I heat the water up to your skin temperature. And so now you're in this salt water floating and you're weightless. And so you have no sense of gravity because you're in water, totally weightless. And gravity is another way to know you have a body because you actually feel
Yep.
the pressure. You're being pulled to the center of the earth. That's what gravity is doing. So now you no longer feel that. So you're not feeling pulled to the center of the earth. And now you actually have no temperature differential on your skin and your eyes are closed. Okay. So at some point there is, and this is what I guide in the narrative, right? So there's the music, and then I'm actually with my voice guiding the narrative. And there's a point in which you have this complete body dissolution, a physical dissolution. And you cannot tell, I promise you cannot tell where your arms are. You have no idea where they are.
Mm.
If you're that relaxed, which I first guide the relaxation. So you're that relaxed, so there's no muscle tension, because that would be an awareness from the inside. So now there's no muscle tension and there's no gravity. They're floating weightless. And now there's no temperature differential from the outside. So there's no internal pressure, no external pressure, and it disappears. And
Mm.
so that's something that even if you get a glimpse of that for 30 seconds of the hour experience, that's enough. It's enough to know that there's something much larger available, right? And then the rest of the guidance is around a boundless awareness, right? And really feeling that. And again, this is not like an intellectual exercise. It's like you really, once you have a disembodiment, then you realize, well, where is my awareness? Is it behind my eyes? Well, maybe not.
It's so beautiful. When you talk, it's just so fascinating because you can really, it's like what I've been saying, you can really feel the energy of the universe as you speak. It's
Mm.
very grateful. Thank you. Um, do you, on that note, also with just like the energy and the flow and music, and it sounds like from a very young age, you were always improvising. Like it didn't feel like you were always just sticking to, the books. Do you feel like part of that idea, because I keep, like, as you're talking about, I just keep feeling like this flow. And it's like, that's what music is, right? It's just this flow. It's just energy moving. It just might have, sound attached to it. Do you feel
Mm.
like because you connected to it so deeply, and also in the way of not the structured way of just kind of improvising, putting your own melodies together, do you think subconsciously that allowed you to just trust flow in life? Like you were saying, you were kind of go with the flow with your mom's kind of moods and stuff. But do you think that was that either you were, do you think you learned it from music, or do you think you had a relationship with music because you both inherently have that ability?
Mm. I would have said in the past that music is this wonderful metaphor for living, right? Like the lessons of music. I've talked about that a lot in the past, like the lessons of music. So right, the art of listening and responding, right, as opposed to reacting, and there's these beautiful lessons available in music, especially improvising, right, where how do you know what the next note is unless you purely listen to the first one, to the
Right.
previous one.
Present.
So it's a real presence. It's an exercise and a practice in presence. Because the moment that you're out of it, you're off the wave, right? You get kicked off the wave. So you're really surfing the music in that sense. Um, but now I would say that yes, I can carry those lessons into other areas of my life. Um, but the doing of it is the living of it. It's there's no distinction for me anymore. Like everything to me is music. And
Mm,
so there's no part of my life that is not musical. And I think of everything in that way. So everything has a rhythm to it. Everything has a harmony to it. Uh, and it doesn't mean everything is always pretty. It doesn't mean
right.
everything's always harmonious.
Exactly.
There's right. So, but understanding the nature of music means you understand the physics of waves, right? And we always want everything to be, wonderful. Well, that would be like a wave only having crests and no troughs, and
Right.
then you wouldn't have music, and you wouldn't have a universe, right? The duality of a wave is built in to the duality of the universe, and it's the acceptance of that, the embracing of that, right? The understanding that in joy there is also pain, and both are just two sides of the same coin. They're just two parts of the same wave, and it's allowing the wave to move through us, as us, and that's being truly in the flow of life, without resistance to the parts we don't like, and just an acceptance of all of it. And then you ride it, and then it dissipates, because no wave lasts forever. But it's hard to remember that when you're in the turbulence of it.
It's just so interesting because I feel like, when we're in the womb, we probably know all this and feel all this because we are just probably versions of music in there and energy. And then most of us come out and reality kind of, structures us in a way that we forget our connection to all of that. It just feels like it was almost like you saw music and you saw the familiarity of who you actually are. Like it's like you both speak the same language
Yeah.
and connected so early because it was almost like, of course, that's going to be your best friend because your best friend already speaks your language. It just feels like you've always embodied this.
Yeah. Uh, I always felt, I will tell you this. I remember as a child feeling displaced. See, I definitely had a sense of being, I'm like, why am I here? I don't feel like I belong here. Like, how did I plop into this physical spot? you know? And I think I've just spent a long time trying to find that belonging. And my show now at the planetarium, for instance, where it has visuals, so distinct from the beach, where nature provides the visuals in a spectacular fashion, but in the planetarium, I create them. And there's a big part of it, which is the reuniting, right, with source in that way. And I
Mm.
actually show, maybe I shouldn't give it away, but I show on the screen, I actually show a live birth, and I talk
Mm.
about, it's not, it's artistically, it's gorgeous, um, but I show a live birth, and I talk about that moment of separation, right? Where we were, just like you said, we were protected and whole and in complete union. And then we're thrust into this harsh, loud, cold world, right? Think about the experience of a newborn. It's got to be horrendous. And so you're cut off. You were warm and cozy. You're cold. It's loud. You get spanked on the butt. It's like, what is going on? And so and then the rest of our lives is like trying to return to that union, right? Then the human arc is no more complex than that. We were in unity, we were separated, and we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back there. And repeat, rinse and repeat, you know? And so, you know, and that in and of itself is a wave, and that in and of itself is musical and gorgeous, right? And all good music has tension and release and, dissonance and consonance and all of it. And that's embodied in the human journey. And our mothers or caretakers, but our mothers are the ones that are there to remind us of that love and ground us in that. And then, of course, we find other proxies for that, in relationships and friendships and intimacy and and having our own children one day, and on it goes. So, that's the music of life.
Have you ever, ever, ever felt disconnected from your music ever? Was there any moment in your life that you couldn't play, or was there any time that you ever felt like it shut down for you?
There have been times when music took on actually an even more powerful meaning. And I can think in terms of particularly grief has been a time when I at first created a little separation from it because I was afraid of what might come out.
Ooh.
So, and that's only because of the sacred relationship I have with music. It's not entertainment for me. So it's not distraction for me. It's not an escape for me. It's going into it. So, I can think to moments of intense grief in my life, where at first I was trepidatious about sitting at the piano and didn't for a number of days. And then when I felt I was ready, I sat down alone at the piano to see what was there.
And what was there?
A lot of pain was there, and a lot of struggle, and a lot of resistance, and a lot of dissonance, and but it was a necessary pathway to feel through, and that's the only way, and any kind of grief, and especially an intense grief. And I what I mean by intense grief is, a grief that is, out of the ordinary, natural way of things. For me, it was the death of my little sister. She was 23, so it was certainly unexpected. It was sudden. It was shocking, tragic, of course, heartbreaking, and I was also with her when it happened. So it was an accident. So there was an additional layer, right, of kind of trauma around it that I had to work through. So it's not just, oh, my sister's not here anymore, and that's heartbreaking, but there was the experience of how that happened, which I had to work through, which was very challenging, and I needed to untangle that. And those kinds of intense grief experiences, they really don't have a lot of words because there's, emotions are multi-layered, right? They are multidimensional. We tend to think that emotions are experienced, one at a time in a linear fashion, but they're absolutely not. And that's only because we have limited language around it, right? We'll say, how you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling sad. And then again, oh, I'm feeling angry. Oh, I'm feeling joyful. Oh, I'm feeling, so we express our emotions in very primitive ways with languaging that has tremendous limitation to it. But all emotions, even if we say, oh, I'm feeling anger, I'm feeling sadness, I'm feeling, all of them are icebergs. They're all icebergs. and what we're naming it is just what's above the surface, and there's an endless layers. There are endless layers of emotional vibration under the water you can't see, and so it's about how much can we surface and become aware of. And language is challenging because it's so linear. Like, you just have to put one word in front of the other to structure a sentence grammatically to communicate. You can't say a lot of words at the same time. It's just noise. But music as a language is multidimensional and multi-layered, right? You can say two things at the same time with music, and it's not noise, it's harmony. So you can have one voice, one note, and another note.
So beautiful.
And the same time, and suddenly you're communicating a third thing. And it's not 1 and 1 is 2, but it's 1 and 1 is 11. It's 1 and 1 is 746. There's an endless amount of combinations, infinite amount of combinations, because our emotional experience is truly infinite. And no one's is the same. Nobody has the same emotional experience. Two people going through the same events have two different emotional experiences. So you need a language that can process multidimensionality. And language and English, or whatever your language is not it.
Right.
It fails, which is why you can't even talk when you're experiencing deep grief, and why it's not even appropriate to talk.
Right. So it's something like that with your
anyway.
sister. No, so something like that with your sister, and through music and through processing your grief. What happens? Do you make sense of it, or do you just accept it? Like, where does it take you?
Oh my! Well, that's a could do 6 podcasts on that. So,
happy to have you back.
And I've not just thought about it extensively, but I've written about it as well, and of course it's in my music on an ongoing basis. And I don't think it's something. It's not something it's not about getting over it, right? It's not like, oh, it's in the past. It keeps taking on new nuance and new forms, right? And because the love that you have, not had, but you have, right, persists, and it lives and breathes within you. So you only grieve to the extent that you're grieving, right, that intensely, because of the love. It's in direct proportion, right? You wouldn't feel this, bad. You wouldn't feel this much pain if you didn't love the person that much. So that's where we have to come back to. That's the reason for the pain, and that is the salvation for the pain. Because it's that love, when we reconnect with it, right, which can carry us to freedom. And that's where I choose to live. So I don't, could you believe this? That decades ago in the psychology world, they would tell people to kind of move on.
Just get over it.
They'd be like, listen, get over it. It's in the past. Move forward, move on. Now they don't do that. I studied to be a grief counselor, and all that, because so many people were coming to me with their own. I wanted to have some framework for it as well, to be able to have those conversations. But now it's about, how do you incorporate the love in your everyday, right? To turn that into life meaning and connection with the person who's no longer with you. So that's what it's about. So every time I sit at the piano now, I envision her right in front of me at the end of the piano. She was a dancer, so I envision her dancing at the end of the piano. And I start that first note. People think I'm staring off into oblivion, maybe getting into a meditative trance or something, but I'm staring at her. That's what I'm doing. And then I start, and then I'm in love. Like, I'm in love.
Oh, it makes me look, I'm all teary-eyed with that. Do you, like, when you sit down and play, do you record yourself every time? Like, or sometimes you're like, nope, this is what it is, and it's out to the universe, and I don't need to know it. Like, how often are you like, no, I want to know what came out? Because I can't imagine you're totally aware as you're playing all this, or maybe you are. Explain to me a little bit of that.
So I do record each one in a sense, more so to kind of catalog
It's
the
like the
evolution.
journal.
Yeah, it is a musical journal. So I record each one. I don't distribute each one. I don't post each one. I have now a catalog of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of concerts. And you can go back and listen from a decade ago till today, and you're like, I don't know if it's that even the same musician in some way. Like, it's kind of interesting. There's
Right.
some similarities and some differences, and like any language, everything evolves. So, and you can't see that, you know, up close, day to day, right? It's like trying to watch hair grow. You just can't see it grow, but suddenly 2 weeks later, you're like, I need a haircut. So, it's kind of like that. Uh, so I do record them all. And then what I do is I use the recordings to learn from. And first of
Mm.
all, I actually like to take a mind travel every now and then too. I've got long flights at times. I'll put a recording on and I'll zone out, and it's just a beautiful way to actually use that music, like anyone else does, to
Yeah.
just really to open up an altered state, which is really the intention of it. It's yes, it could be about healing, it could be about processing emotion, but it really also is about that language of the universe and using vibration, which is the language of the universe, period. Right? It's just the universe uses different frequencies to communicate with itself. That's what it's doing. So, um, I'm using music in that same way, and we can use music to achieve altered states very efficiently,
Very.
very efficiently. So that's what I use it for. And I'll go into this altered state, which many traditions have talked about. We have our sleeping state, and in sleep state, you've got two rough states, which is deep sleep, dreamless sleep, and REM sleep. There's of course, remember, everything's a spectrum. So these are very coarse descriptions, right? There's not actually just two states of sleep. There's light sleep and dream sleep and dreamless sleep, deep sleep. But it's a spectrum. We move fluidly, between them. And then in the conscious state, in the awake state, right? It's not just awake and sleeping. That's very crude. There's also a spectrum of awake states. There's different levels of consciousness. So music can take us, certain kind of music can take us into a state in which we are awake, right? We are like, our eyes are open, we're awake, we're taking in the world, but we're doing it in a way that is, again, words fail in these
Yeah.
situations, but it's a state that is so calm and still, yet at the same time is so alive and engaged. It's
Yeah.
a funny place.
Well, it's like you were describing, when you're on these trips and you're just staring at the stars or you're listening to the wind. Again,
Yeah,
it's quiet, but
yeah,
it's very lively.
exactly. These some people might call it a flow state, but it is. Even flow state is a spectrum in and of itself. That's a whole other conversation. But it's such a profound state of creativity, and I don't mean artistic creativity, but I mean um, creativity as a conversation with the universe,
Yeah.
where there's no separation between you and the universe, and that's such a hard thing for us to actually grapple with because we are self-reflective, right? We're one of the only species we know which are self-reflective. So it's very hard for us to actually be in union because we're so self-reflective.
I mean, yes, and you're right. And the music reminds us that we are connected to source, like back to that whole thing. So I have one personal question then. So if you record all of the times you sit down, so that first time, you were a little reticent to sit down because you didn't know what would come up, and you record after your sister's death. Did you ever go back and listen to it?
Back then, I wasn't recording.
No.
I only have recorded live performances.
Oh, okay. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
If every time you sit down for your
Oh,
own,
yeah, no. No, sometimes I do now because I have a piano that's easy to do that. But back then I didn't, and I don't have those recordings. Um, I will tell you something I do have, which was in my parents' house. Growing up, we eventually got a piano that has like a disc you put in to record yourself, like in the
oh,
piano. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, it was a cool technology that they made. So like later childhood, we had that, and my sister certainly had that because she was the youngest. So she certainly had that piano in the house when she grew up and played the piano. And then one day, a couple of years after she died, I was in the house, my parents' house, and I was going through that music room at the piano I grew up in, and I opened the piano bench, where there's like books and all the stuff you have no idea what's in there. Like there's a tuna fish sandwich. I don't know. There's like a million things in there. It's like whatever. So I look in there. There's all these books from when we were kids, and I see some of these discs. I was like, what's on these discs? And some of them I had recorded some stuff, but I find this one disc and I pop it in, and the last piece that my sister was learning at the piano. Um, was the first movement of the Moonlight Sonata,
Hmm.
and it was a recording of her playing the Moonlight Sonata. Now, when I say recording, it's not an audio recording. The keys move on the key on the piano.
So it's like she's there playing.
It's like she's there playing. And so I put this in and I just sit back and the keys start moving. And it's not just the Moonlight Sonata, it's her Moonlight Sonata because it has the few mistakes that she made when she recorded it. And it just is like the most precious thing, to have, to still have that. So anyway, there's that, talk about music communicating through the ages, through time, right? There's this,
That's so beautiful. That's amazing.
yeah.
Did your
Uh,
parents know? Were you like, oh my God, you
yeah,
have to come see this?
yeah,
Wow.
of course. Of course. Yeah, of course.
Wow. This conversation's been so incredible. I'm grateful. It's the conversation itself did what I love about what I think music does for everyone, which is it's stimulating, it taps into a deeper part of you if you'll let it to remind you that you're more. And I feel like your words just do that naturally. So thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this was really amazing and inspiring. And everyone, like, why don't you talk about your website really briefly? Because you have so much stuff that you offer there, and all of your, events are listed on there as well.
Yeah, no, I invite everyone to go to mindtravel.com. It's as simple as that. And that's where we list everything that we're up to. And we bring this to, cities all over the country, to a beach near you, but coast to coast. So, yeah, please join us. There's the beach concert. There's the underwater we do. It's a floating meditation. We do walks as well. These walking meditations across the Brooklyn Bridge, and
Amazing.
just incredible. So just again, all about kind of engaging in that conversation, externally and internally, and using music to kind of bridge that.
Well, thank you for what you do. Thank you for sharing so openly here today. And I'm really appreciative.
Thank you so much.
We'll talk soon.